There's something uniquely unsettling about discovering that the cartoons you watched as a child were hiding something you were never meant to fully understand. Kids' shows exist in this strange dual space. Bright colors and silly voices on the surface, but sometimes buried just underneath something genuinely disturbing. Whether it was a bored animator sneaking something past the censors, a writer processing trauma through subtext, or a studio making a creative choice they'd later deeply regret, these moments found their way into frames that millions of children watched on Saturday mornings, completely unaware. Some of these Easter eggs were accidental, some were deliberate, and some were so dark that once they were discovered, the episodes were quietly pulled from rotation and never broadcast again. These are 5 of those moments, explained fully, with the context that makes them even more disturbing than they first appear. 1. Dexter's Laboratory. Dial M for Monkey. Barbequa, 1996. Dexter's Laboratory was Cartoon Network's golden child in the mid-90s. A clever, fast-paced show about a boy genius hiding a secret lab from his oblivious parents. It was charming, sharp, and aimed squarely at kids who like to feel smart, which makes what happened in one of its early Dial M for Monkey segments all the more jarring. In Barbequa, the superhero Monkey faces off against a villain whose design, behavior, and iconography drew unmistakable parallels to real-world hate group symbolism. The character's imagery incorporated visual references that were close enough to white supremacist iconography that when viewed by adult eyes, the connection was impossible to ignore. The segment also included dialogue and visual jokes that played on racial stereotypes in ways that, even within the comedic framing of the show, crossed lines that should never have been crossed in children's programming. What makes this case particularly fascinating is the production timeline. The segment aired during the show's very first season, when oversight was still being established, and the creative team was testing the boundaries of what they could get away with. Genndy Tartakovsky, the show's creator, later acknowledged that certain early episodes contained content that didn't align with the direction he wanted for the series. Cartoon Network pulled the segment from reruns without making any formal public statement about it, which was standard practice for the network at the time. They simply let it disappear. The episode still circulates in online archives, and when modern viewers encounter it for the first time, the reaction is almost always the same mixture of disbelief and dark amusement that something this tone-deaf made it to air at all. 2. Cow and Chicken. Buffalo Gals, 1997. Cow and Chicken was always the weird one. Even by Cartoon Network standards in the late 1990s, it operated on a kind of surrealist, anarchic energy that made it feel slightly unhinged in a way that kids found hilarious and parents found mildly concerning. Creator David Feiss leaned hard into absurdist humor, and the show's recurring villain, the Red Guy, a naked, red-skinned demon who appeared in various disguises, was already pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in a children's cartoon. But nothing in the show's run came close to what happened in Buffalo Gals. The episode features a biker gang called the Buffalo Gals who break into Cow and Chicken's house and begin chewing on the carpet. Literally chewing on the carpet. The visual gag is presented as pure absurdist comedy on the surface level, but the euphemism being deployed here is one of the most explicitly sexual phrases in the English language, and it's being acted out in graphic visual detail in a children's cartoon. The Buffalo Gals are coated with unmistakable lesbian stereotypes. Their appearance, mannerisms, and behavior are all drawn from the same cultural shorthand, and the central joke of the entire episode is built around the double meaning of the phrase. Cartoon Network pulled the episode almost immediately after it aired. It has never been rebroadcast. The network acknowledged the removal but provided no explanation, which was perhaps the most appropriate response available to them. The truly remarkable thing about Buffalo Gals is not just that it got made, but that it got made with such deliberate intent. This wasn't an accident. Someone wrote this, someone approved it, and it aired once on national television before disappearing into the vault. 3. The Rugrats. In the Dreamtime, 1993. The Rugrats was one of the defining cartoons of an entire generation. Nickelodeon's flagship series followed a group of toddlers navigating a world that was enormous and confusing from their perspective, and the show handled childhood imagination with genuine warmth and creativity. It was also quietly and consistently one of the most emotionally sophisticated children's shows of its era. But In the Dreamtime went somewhere that the show's writers may not have fully anticipated would register as disturbing. The episode focuses on Chucky, the show's anxious, fearful toddler, who begins having difficulty distinguishing his dreams from reality. The premise is charming enough. A child so lost in his imagination that the waking world starts to feel less real than his dream world. But the execution takes a turn that, when examined closely, reads as a remarkably accurate portrayal of dissociation and childhood trauma responses. Chucky's mother died before the series began, and while the show rarely addressed this directly in its early seasons, In the Dreamtime is saturated with the grief of a child who has lost something foundational and is searching for it in sleep. The sequence where Chucky cannot determine whether he is awake or dreaming and begins to panic in a way that is played not for comedy but for genuine distress, hit differently for child viewers who were themselves processing loss or anxiety. The episode was not removed from reruns for this reason, but it was quietly edited in some international markets and has been flagged repeatedly by child psychologists as an example of content that, while not inappropriate, may be genuinely frightening for vulnerable young viewers in ways that even attentive parents might not anticipate. 4. Ren and Stimpy, Man's Best Friend, 1992. If any show was always going to appear on this list, it was Ren and Stimpy. John Kricfalusi's creation was controversial from the moment it debuted on Nickelodeon in 1991, a deliberately grotesque adult-coded cartoon that somehow ended up in children's Saturday morning programming, and which spent its entire run testing exactly how far it could push before the network would push back. The answer, it turned out, was not very far at all once the right episode aired. Man's Best Friend was the episode that ended John Kricfalusi's tenure on the show entirely. The plot involves Ren and Stimpy being adopted by a man named George Liquor, and it culminates in a scene where Ren beats George Liquor with an oar in a sequence of graphic, sustained animated violence that goes so far beyond anything the show had attempted before that Nickelodeon refused to air it. The beating is not played for laughs in any conventional sense. It is prolonged. It is visceral. And the animation quality in that specific sequence is some of the finest in the show's run, which makes it more disturbing rather than less. Kricfalusi fought to air it, Nickelodeon refused, and the disagreement contributed directly to his firing. The episode was eventually aired on Spike TV years later, after the show had been reimagined for an adult audience. But the original version, produced under the assumption that it would air on Nickelodeon to children, remains one of the most extreme examples of a children's cartoon creator completely losing sight of, or deliberately ignoring, the audience the show was made for. Kricfalusi later faced accusations of far more serious misconduct, which reframes the aggressive, boundary-violating energy of the show's production history in a deeply uncomfortable light. 5. Pokémon Electric Soldier Porygon, 1997. No discussion of dark moments in cartoon history is complete without Electric Soldier Porygon, and yet it remains one of the most genuinely serious entries on any list like this, because this one actually hurt people. The episode, which aired in Japan on December 16, 1997, features a sequence in which Pikachu uses a thunderbolt attack that triggers a rapid strobe effect of alternating red and blue flashes. The sequence lasts approximately 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, 685 children across Japan were hospitalized with symptoms including seizures, temporary blindness, nausea, and convulsions. It was the largest mass medical incident ever triggered by a television broadcast, and it resulted in immediate international attention, a 4-month suspension of the Pokémon anime, and a complete overhaul of broadcasting standards for photosensitive content not just in Japan, but globally. The episode has never been rebroadcast anywhere in the world. It exists in archives and has circulated online, though responsible platforms have consistently avoided hosting the specific sequence in question. The irony that haunts the episode is that Porygon, the Pokémon who stars in it, has never appeared in a speaking or featured role in the anime since, despite having no involvement in the actual strobe effect. Pikachu caused it. Porygon was blamed by proximity and cultural embarrassment, and has been quietly kept out of the anime for nearly 3 decades as a result. It is the most consequential 4 seconds in the history of animation, and the children who were watching that morning in 1997 could not have imagined that a cartoon about collecting monsters would send them to the hospital before breakfast.